the one thing would be that emotions and empathy and systemizing that into a process and scaling it across every single customer every day and every employee every day has a huge return on investment.
Welcome to the Global Experience. Get ready as we take you into the dynamic world of customer service and collections.
You will gain access to the secrets of success in the world of customer and employee experience through conversations with keynote speakers, industry mavericks, and CX and debt collections experts and influencers.
Let's get into it.
Welcome back to another episode. Joining us today is the founder and CEO of Anthrolytics, a disruptive behavioral analytics company changing the CX employee engagement landscape. He is someone with a long history in leading several CX software companies. He's a lecturer, a serial entrepreneur, and an overall quality guy. Jonathan Hawkins, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bryce. Great. Really appreciate you having me on.
Brilliant. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing very well, thank you. Very well.
Cool. So, Jonathan, something we like to do with our guests. As we know, podcasts are often recorded with the guest and the host sitting on opposite ends of the world. So, we would just like to give our listeners a better feel of where you are in the world by you providing where you are by suburb, city, country, and maybe just telling us about what the time is and the temperature outside at the moment.
Sure. Well, we really are on the other side of the world. So I'm actually in a place called Wayland, which is just outside Boston, I moved over here. I want to say 2 months ago. So I'm just experiencing the very, very cold mornings, right, which have just started. So it's about 2 degrees outside. The heating's on, and it's where are we? 9:20 in the morning. So beautiful sunny day. But honestly, right now, I'd rather be in South Africa with a bit of sunshine and warmth.
2 degrees outside. I'm very, very glad that we're here in South Africa. I think it's 32 degrees in Johannesburg, South Africa at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not wearing a t-shirt, Bryce. Let's put it like that.
That's brilliant. So maybe just to kind of dive into a good conversation here is, do you want to tell us a little bit about the man, Jonathan Hawkins, and what you guys are leading towards at Anthrolytics?
Sure. Now, I can't take full credit for this, Bryce, right? This is my co-founder, Peter Dorrington, created the intellectual property around this. And for years, Peter's fascination was trying to fuse behavioral science and data science to be able to predict what somebody's likely to do next and why. And the initial question that we were asked around this was, if we do something our customers or employees don't like, how likely are they to leave us? And it sounds like a really simple question, right? And people tend to, and I was on the exec team of a survey company, right? CX company. So I was the world's greatest proponent of surveys being able to tell what somebody was going to do next. But the reality of it is, we all really know what our customers and our employees don't like. And the way people react to it depends on how they feel about you. If somebody loves you and you do something they don't like, well, they'll be a little bit upset, but they're not going to leave you. And so we really started working on these sort of algorithms to say, look, are we able to predict people's emotional profile every day and subsequently what they're likely to do next? As I say, I take no credit for this. This was 7 years of Peter locking himself in a darkened room writing algorithms, and ultimately that transformed into what is now Anthrolytics and a SaaS platform which will allow organizations to use operational data to predict what somebody will do next and why based on their emotional profile. And I think that becomes very important nowadays when, we think about how people want to be treated empathetically. I think PwC did a study which said that, 87% of people put being treated empathetically at the top of their list of drivers of loyalty. So, it becomes very, very relevant when you think about all the changes that have gone on in the world over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
And I'm curious, the name Anthrolytics, I'm assuming it derives from the study that is anthropology, right?
Well, it does, but so shall I tell you an inappropriate and funny story about how the name Anthrolytics came about? Yeah, because I thought you'd like this, because I saw when Natalie sent me the questions about anthropology, and there is obviously an anthropological basis to it, and anthropology really is, the focus is understanding shared humanity and diversity and engaging with people in diverse ways and their own way of being in the world. And ultimately, if you think about what we do, we allow organizations to connect with people empathetically based on how they are, right, in a very diverse manner. Now, actually, how the name came about was my legendary impatience of having an idea and trying to get some traction with it. Peter and I agreed we were going to set up the company. I said, right, I'm just going to organize some meetings. And to my surprise, people really wanted to talk about it. And then I found myself in a position where I had arranged meetings, didn't have a company name or a website or a logo or anything, and had to come up with a name very, very quickly. So I poured my wife and my daughter a very large gin. I got some roll out white sheets of paper to put on the dining room table and said, nobody's leaving until we have a name, right? And that's how the name Anthrolytics came about. It was very gin inspired, Bryce, unfortunately. So not really the appropriate story for founders, but that's the reality of how it happened. But I do think the anthropological connection is very, very relevant to what we do and what we give companies the ability to do nowadays.
I mean, I don't think I've heard of an idea that had gin involved that wasn't the best idea ever. So I can only say that you guys obviously went along the right route to success from the
Well,
outright there.
it seemed to work, Bryce. It seemed to work. So I don't...
Yeah. So now if we tie that into so anthropology, anthrolytics, and the contact center world, why did you decide to venture into the contact center world from that aspect?
Yeah. So I think. Look, I mean, several reasons. There are obviously commercial reasons for doing it, right? And then there are application reasons. And the commercial reasons, when you're working with any form of AI or data-led products, right? The challenge always is getting the data, okay? And the challenge is finding that individual who has enough political capital in an organization to pull the data together. So from a pure sort of commercial perspective, the contact center is a very good place because all of the data we need, all of the operational data, so ACDs, WFM, QM platforms, all of the things that every contact center will have, is the operational data that we need in order to run the predictions. So there's a very sort of practical rationale behind it in terms of it's a simpler place to go and do what we need to do. Now, the bigger reason for doing it is that there is a huge burning platform in contact centers today, and that burning platform is attrition and is employee wellness. You think about what a contact center agent goes through day in, day out. Typically, people don't call to go, hi, I just wanted to tell you what a great company you are. It's a problem, largely. Right, they're trying to buy something, they're trying to negotiate the price down, they're trying to churn, whatever it may be. But typically, there is not a bunch of happy people calling up, and so you think about dealing with that day in, day out. That is a tough job, and I know people think of it as very straightforward. You turn up, you do your shift, you go home, but it's pretty brutal, right? I mean, any of us who've worked in contact centers and been in that environment, it's a hard life, and you add to that. The fact that there are a lot of agents now working remotely or in a hybrid environment, and that also becomes very lonely, right? You're now sitting at your home, being battered. You're potentially not seeing anybody all day, and I work from home a lot, and it's quite hard, right? If you're on calls all day and you don't see anybody, and so those days really of team leaders and managers being able to walk the floor and identify, look, who is potentially feeling down. They're very much gone, and that trend is going to continue over a period of time. And so really our thinking was, look, if we can now put data in the hands of team leaders and contact center management to identify which of those employees are emotionally going downhill and the reasons why, they can now intervene, right? It might be, I don't know, we've changed your shift at the last minute 3 or 4 times. We've had you on the complaints line and doing a night shift, right? These are all things that get lost in the world of productivity KPIs, right? I mean, as you well know better than I do, right? Contact centers are run on productivity KPIs. And the reality is there are humans at the end of that, right, who have to deliver it. And my rationale is if we can now start understanding how people feel while they're delivering those KPIs, if we can treat them empathetically and show a level of understanding, within the operational parameters that we have, obviously, the employee engagement is going to be far better. You start reducing employee burnout, right? Imagine a world now where I can actually see Bryce's emotional profile trending down and trending down. Potentially, does that put Bryce at risk of being vulnerable, right? I saw a report the other day that, absence is increasing. And the reason for that absence, 62% of it, was mental health issues. And I would argue that if you did that study purely in contact centers, that would probably be a lot higher. And so I think by being able to treat people empathetically, understanding how they are, right, then actually you're going to drive far greater loyalty from your team, by definition far higher productivity, and frankly, whilst it might sound a bit daft, just make the work environment a better place to be, right? I mean, that's ultimate. We spend most of our lives there, so the better we can make it, the better it is for everybody.
And it's almost ironic because you're speaking a lot to the data side of things, making data-driven and data-informed decisions for the betterments, I guess, of employee wellness. But you'd think empathy is something that cannot be, I want to say, defined or concentrated around data. So how do you bridge that gap between data analytics and that perspective, and then using that to showcase a bit more empathy? Is it more in a proactivity approach?
Yeah, and I think it's giving people the data they need, so team leaders and management, the data they need to be empathetic. So let's say you're a team leader, you've got 10 people in your team, 5 of them are working from home, a couple are hybrid, whatever it may be, or even if they're in the office all day, right? You're busy. We're being hammered with data day in, day out, and a lot of that human connection gets lost. And I'm a great believer, and I know everyone's sort of pushing AI and what have you, and it's the great buzzword at the moment. But I think the point of AI should be to augment human decision making, right? And I think that's kind of where it gets lost. People think about AI and they kind of say, well, it can replace humans and it can do this and look, can it? Right, to a degree, partially, right? It can solve simple questions in a contact center, right? It can help me, I don't know, do reminders on my phone, ask Siri, all these kind of things. But where it really comes into its own is augmenting human decision making. And so when I think about the type of data we provide to people, it's data that allows people to be empathetic. So to be empathetic, you've got to understand how somebody feels. And without understanding that, you're frankly being sympathetic, you're pandering, and probably frankly inappropriately. What we seek to do is give people data to augment their decision making. And this is how I think all AI platforms should be built, frankly, right? How do we give people data to improve their decision making, their actioning, towards a particular goal, and in our world that particular goal is creating a great culture, it's reducing attrition, which, by the way, right, being empathetic does not mean that there isn't a great commercial return on that, right? You start reducing employee attrition, you start reducing unplanned absence. These things have very, very high return on investment, allied to the fact that obviously it's better for the customers as well, right? If you're speaking to somebody who is motivated, is well tenured, your call's going to be handled better, your customer experience will be better, and the loyalty towards the brand ultimately will be driven higher through having a great company culture.
And it's in our space. Obviously, empathy is big towards showing up as a brand, right? Showing a brand's customers empathy, like from a customer
Yeah.
service agent perspective. But I think something that might be overlooked in general, I think, in the BPO industry, is showing that empathy to your own employees. And I think it's very interesting that, I mean, I've never heard of digital empathy, and I think that is something that you guys talk about in mass, is that digital
Yeah.
empathy at scale. And what would you say is like, how would a company start incorporating that digital empathy at scale? Like, what is the first steps
Yeah.
towards getting to that
Yeah,
goal?
so I think there's sort of two sides to it, Bryce, and I think you pointed out very accurately, right? People, when they talk about empathy today, talk about it on a one-to-one basis, right? They, and they'll use, I don't know, speech analytics to say, well, the customer's angry. Now you've got, be empathetic to the customer, right? So there's a lot of information pushed to agents from the customer point of view. There's a lot of training for team leaders or call center agents how to be empathetic to people. But as I said earlier, without knowing how somebody feels, it's not empathy, right? It's more along sympathy and so on and so forth. It's not well directed. Let's put it like that. And so when we talk about digital empathy, what we mean by that is that we allow companies to be empathetic at scale by, if you use it on the customer side of the house as an example. Let me just try and give you a real example on how you could use it, right? So we're able to predict the emotional profile of every customer every day. So now imagine a world where you have that data set and somebody hits the contact center. Now you can understand, is somebody likely to, when they're calling in, are they a potential churn risk? Are they incredibly happy and ready to buy? Are they probably looking to buy less? Are they fairly ambivalent? Now that can have a material impact on how you would route that person, right? You could put them to self-serve. So if I'm incredibly happy and I'm ready to buy, honestly, you could push me through self-serve. I'm probably going to buy anyway, and I'll probably be just as happy. From a BPO perspective, you've obviously reduced the overhead, and the customer experience from your client's brand will still be exceptional. Now, if on the other hand I call in and I'm unhappy, well, actually, you probably don't want to push me to self-serve. You probably want to push me to a well-tenured agent, right? Somebody who can deal with my query very quickly and efficiently. And that in itself is empathy, because you understand how I feel at the time, and you're treating me in a manner that is responsive to the way I'm feeling, right? What isn't responsive is pushing everyone to self-serve just because it makes a bit more sense commercially, right? Because actually the impact to the brand's loyalty is huge. Now, from an agent point of view, exactly the same applies, right? If I'm very happy and you change my shift at the last minute, okay, probably not going to impact my motivation greatly. If, on the other hand, I'm somebody who's at risk of taking unplanned absence, well, the odds are I'm probably not going to be in tomorrow, right? And within 3 or 4 weeks, I'm probably going to leave. And so now you're into this recruitment headache, and that becomes self-fulfilling, right? I mean, as you well know, in a center, right, half a dozen people leave in a short space of time. People are looking around going, well, why shouldn't I leave, right? And it's kind of a race to the bottom almost. So, and really, the way that companies try to deal with that today is by understanding how people feel at a point of interaction. So using text analytics, speech analytics, you can easily understand how somebody feels when they call in. But the question is, if you've already routed them in an inappropriate manner and you treated them very unempathetically, right, the agent's going to get hell on the phone, right? You're either going to get a complaint, right? The loyalty to the brand, they're going to churn, whatever it may be. And so this point of interaction measurement is interesting, but let's not forget, that probably only covers about 5% of your customers on an annual basis. What about the other 95%? Do you not want to know how they feel? because I would. And from an employee point of view, we do lots of employee surveys and smiley faces. How are you feeling this morning when they come into the office? Well, the reality is, and it's the sort of dirty unspoken truth, right? The only time you find out really how somebody feels using one of those surveys is the day they walk out the door, right? It doesn't really give an accurate measure. And so what we seek to do is give this objective measure. And when we talk about digital empathy at scale, we're using the means of digital and operational data to predict everybody every day. Okay, so as opposed to only those people who interact with you.
It's so interesting that you kind of spoke about the process before a customer hits an agent as being like making that conscious, or I guess I would say it probably happened more from an IVR perspective, but routing them to the best agent for their need is a form of empathy, because we often think that
Absolutely.
empathy is that conversation between the agent and the customer, not what happens before the customer gets to the agent. So that's very interesting.
So it's a slightly different way of looking at it, but as I say, it's if you think about actually what empathy is, it's treat me according to how I feel about you, right? Or at least recognize it. You may not be able to give me what I want. We did a study with one of the contact center vendors that the data showed very clearly that if you treated somebody empathetically, both from a routing and a call handling perspective, but didn't solve their query, you got far greater loyalty scores than if you handled the query unempathetically, okay, and resolved it. So you could resolve it, and I'd still dislike you, right? Right? You could not solve it, right? Really understand how I felt about it, and I'd be far more grateful to you at the end of the day and demonstrate greater loyalty. So, it's almost counterintuitive. And I think particularly in contact centers, and I've sort of been around this space for, way too many years. I think I was, probably 30 years, I guess. But, it's all about operational KPIs, whether it be on the customer side or whether it be on the employee side. And actually, on both sides of the house, you get a lot more out of people if you understand where they are today and you treat them accordingly.
Yeah, and are you finding that contact centers in general are looking more at the analytical approach at handling, I guess, the employee attrition? Are you finding that that's a big learning curve that needs to happen quickly in order to get that digital empathy across both to the customers and to their own employees?
I think it's, I mean, it's really interesting, and it's pretty binary actually, Bryce. It's kind of, you speak to some people and they're like, yeah, I get it entirely, because people aren't focusing on attrition, right? Everyone says, oh my God, the attrition problem's terrible, right? And I think I saw a study. I think it's on average globally, it's like 41%. Now, if you think how many, I think there are 20 million contact center agents in the world. 40% is a lot of people every year. That's a lot of people churning, and so the scale of the problem is huge. It's costing businesses somewhere around 6-7 billion a year just to replace those agents that are leaving. And I think that some people get it. Some people look at it as cost of doing business. And I know, you guys, frankly, are one of the exceptions in the BPO space, where you're very, very focused on, the employee experience and building that great culture. But, there's a number of people in that space. It's almost, and I hate to use this phrase, but it is the way they look at it. Agents are a consumable item. And that's just a terrible place to be, right? It's just, it's not a long-term strategy, right? It's just, it's just just from a humankind perspective, it's an awful place to be. But I think people are either very focused on, they've realised there's a big problem, they've realised they need to look for a solution to it, and we're one of the few solutions out there that is focused on it. But then there are other people who are so wrapped up in the operational KPIs. And don't actually realise that if they focused on the employees a bit more, the operational KPIs would really take care of themselves, right? And so, it's the big stick approach, and frankly, that management approach went out with the arc. It's not something in the 21st century we should be doing.
I think it's shifting that focus to less of our agents are a commodity and more to our agents are our assets. I think that is the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree entirely. Because they are, right? I mean, it's all very well measuring an operational KPI, but if the people on the phone are demotivated and unhappy and don't like working for the brand themselves, that comes across, right? I mean, you can always tell when somebody's unhappy, either in a personal conversation or a business conversation. You know, it's so easy to spot the people who are demotivated and the ones that don't like the work environment, and that's not it's not healthy for them, and it's certainly not healthy for the brand.
For sure. Um, Jonathan, if there's one thing you'd want a listener to get out of this podcast, what would that be?
I think it would be that there is a different way, right? And I think, I think what was interesting is when Peter and I started talking about empathy a couple of years ago, right? It was everyone looked at us like we were mad, right? And I think now we're seeing a lot more people. And look, possibly we are, right? I don't know. It's perfectly conceivable that we are mad. But I think now when we're starting to talk to people about emotions and empathy, I think everyone looks at it as something very soft. And I think if there's one thing I'd like people to take away from it, is that when you start thinking about individuals' emotions and treating them empathetically, not only is that just frankly the right thing to do, there is also a huge return on investment for doing so, right? By being able to predict, just using this one example, right? Being able to predict who's going to resign and just having them stay, intervening empathetically, having them stay for another month, will probably knock 20% off your attrition bill, right? From a customer perspective, we've seen examples. One of the top 3 banks in the US, 66 million customers, reduced their marketing costs by 38% because guess what? They were only selling to people who wanted to buy, right? And so they've thrown out the old demographic, right? And said, well, why are we going to? So if Jonathan hates us, but he's in the right demographic, why are we going to try to sell to him? Because all that's going to do is wind me up more, right? Actually treat me empathetically. So I think the one thing would be that emotions and empathy and systemizing that into a process and scaling it across every single customer every day and every employee every day has a huge return on investment.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna pivot slightly more to the more fun section of our podcast, where we're going to test out.
This is what I'm worried about, bro. Yeah.
We're gonna test out your South African knowledge.
Yeah. So yeah, like Bryce said, onto
Oh
the
dear.
fun
If it
section.
includes rugby, I'm going to hang up. Yeah.
No, you got to give it a try. So yeah, onto the fun section. That's what I'm here for. So
Okay.
we're gonna run you through a 3-question South African trivia. So we're gonna test your knowledge on how well you know South Africa, and then we can see how well you know at the end. Cool. So
Really badly, I think.
no, I'm sure you'll do great. They're quite easy. So question 1 is, what is the nickname often used to just describe the diverse culture of South Africa? So option A is Rainbow Nation, option B is Cultural Melting Pot, and option C is Multicultural Marvel. What do you think the answer is?
I'm going to go Rainbow Nation.
Okay. Locked in. We're going to move on to question 2. Which South African mountain is considered one of the new 7 wonders of nature and offers a 360 view of Cape Town? Is it A, Mount Kilimanjaro, B, Table Mountain, or C, Drakensberg Mountains? Which one do you think it is?
I'm going to go Table Mountain.
Okay. Question 3. The Big 5 consists of the lion, leopard, elephant, buffalo, and option A is giraffe, option B, rhino, and option C is hippo. Which one do you think it is?
Oh. I should know this because I did a safari in Kenya a couple of years ago. I'm going to go rhino,
Okay.
but I think that's wrong, actually. But I'm going to go rhino. How did I
Okay,
do?
how do you
Come on.
think you did?
I think 2 out of 3. Maybe 1 out of 3. I
Jonathan,
don't know. If I get any more than 0, I'll be happy.
you actually got 3 out of 3. That is amazing. Well done.
Did I?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So the question 1, South
You
Africa is
got-
often known as the Rainbow Nation due to its multicultural diversity. We have 12 official languages, and our country is filled with rich cultures and traditions. So well done. That was very good. Question 2. The answer was Table Mountain. Cape Town's Table Mountain is one of the oldest mountains on Earth and is one of the new 7 wonders of nature. And then question 3, you also got correct, and that is the rhino. And fun fact about the rhino, there is a white and black rhino, but they're in fact both grey. And then moving on to you. So I hope our listeners learned something about South Africa that you already knew. But the next thing is, could you please provide us a fun fact about your country of birth or where you are at the moment?
I'm going to give you a wildlife fun fact because only because yesterday morning, after you sent me an email about, or whenever it was the other day, you sent me an email. I wandered to the window in my living room and saw my front garden full of wild turkeys. Right, and so I'm like, I've never seen a wild turkey before, ever. But then I was born in London, right? There aren't many wild turkeys there, so you might get the odd fox or a rat, but that's about it. So my daughter, funnily enough, looks up wild turkeys. The stupid fact about wild turkeys: they're hugely aggressive towards humans. Who knew? So the advice, if you come across, this could be a useful tip should you ever be in the woods in Massachusetts, right? Pick up a stone and throw it at them. Apparently, is the only way to stop them because they were a protected species. There were so many of them now. They now think they're the alpha predator, and so they're afraid of nothing, particularly not human beings. So if you see one on the road, it'll just stand there and just stare at you, kind of in a threatening manner, run away or throw a stone at it. Apparently, that's the advice. So there you go. That's my useless fact about Massachusetts.
I'm just thinking, there's like headlines now. Jonathan Hawkins viciously attacked by a wild turkey.
Attacked it. Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, if you see that, Bryce, just don't laugh. All right, don't spit your coffee out.
Brilliant. So, I mean, that's certainly an interesting fact that I've learned. Jonathan,
Yeah.
so just kind of rounding up here, rounding this up, where can our listeners find you online if they want to get in touch with you?
Okay, so either on LinkedIn, so it's Jonathan Hawkins, and the company is Anthrolytics, or on our website they can. Actually, probably the easiest way, you can either drop me an email, which is Jonathan JONATHAN @anthrolytics.io. The website is anthrolytics.io as well. Okay, so either of those or on LinkedIn, just connect with me. Delighted to answer any questions, whether they be, either about your own business or anything to do with sort of AI contact centers. As I say, I've been around a while, so I can. I've got an opinion for better or worse on most things.
That's fantastic. So, I just must say a big thank you for joining us on our show today. I think there are going to be very few people, I think, in this industry who are as passionate about digital empathy as yourself and are going towards behavioral analytics or around behavioral analytics and treating both our customers and employees the right way from a data-driven approach. And I think just from my perspective, if there's one thing that I'd like our listeners to walk away with today, it's the notion that in the age of digital transformation, infusing empathy into your business processes, I think can create a more authentic and meaningful connection with your customers. And I think you guys are certainly angling towards that aspect as well. So, listeners, just a reminder, you can follow Jonathan Hawkins on his LinkedIn. You can email him. We'll have all of his social media handles as well as email in the show notes. So have a look. But Jonathan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Much appreciated.
Thank you for tuning in. We hope you had as much fun as we did and gained valuable experience insights.
Let us know what you think. Connect with us on social media and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Stay inspired, stay customer-centric, and know that the world of customer experience and collections is within your reach, the global experience.